Hi, how are you? We have gotten to the second book of Leo Tolstoy, Anna Karenina. Or it's not the second that he wrote, but it's the second we talk about. Like you remember, Leo Tolstoy was a Russian writer who was born in 1828 and died in 1910. So he lived in a totally different society that we do. And if you want to know more about him and you haven't watched already, please watch the video that I made of him. Well, this story, Anna Karenina, there has been many movies made out of this. But whatever you do, do not watch the movie before you read this book. After that, you can watch the movies if you want to. But I find that it's very hard, very complicated to get this kind of book in a 2 or 3 hour movie. Time doesn't simply, there isn't not enough time. So there's so many things left out that it doesn't compare to the book in any way. I understand that there has been many movies made out of this book because the main character, Anna Karenina, is described as a very beautiful woman with an angel-like behavior and very discreet manner. So she's something like an ideal woman, this kind of etheric beauty. But unlike other love stories from this age, she's a married woman. She's married to Karenin, which is a very remarkable man, and she has a son that she loves very much. But from the beginning of the book, she meets Count Vronsky and falls in love. And there starts their story. There are 3 stories of relationships in this book, and with Anna Karenina it's just one. But with Anna Karenina there is a lot of description of emotions, about this feeling of love, about this feeling of desperation and a feeling of jealousy. And they are in very strong position with Anna. If I be completely honest, I think that there is a little bit something of a lack of the intensity of emotion, because myself I'm a very a strong woman in that kind of sense, that I have very strong emotions. I feel that there is something lacking in this, but nevertheless it is very accurate and very good description. But the story of Anna and Vronsky is one of the 3 stories. The other story is about Anna Karenina's sister-in-law, who finds out that her husband has multiple lovers, and that shocks her a great deal. She didn't have any clue that this kind of thing could happen, although we know now that it was quite common in Russia, and it's quite common still in many societies that men have multiple lovers, but the same thing is not allowed for women. And it might be a natural thing, but nevertheless, she is very upset and thinks about what her options are regarding that she has at least 6 children and some new one all the way all the time. She's constantly pregnant. So there aren't very many options in that situation, but she has to deal with it. But that's also a set of emotions of a woman with children. The third love story is about this young couple that has a great deal of difficulties, and there are misunderstandings and there are third parties, and there is lots of things happening until they finally, in some kind of consequences, end up proposing and then getting married. But as the world was what it was in those days, they didn't really know each other, because it was not suitable for young men to visit even women's family home if there was a woman of a suitable age to be married, but just a few times before he had to decide whether to propose the lady or not. Otherwise, it would have been considered inappropriate. So they didn't know each other very well. And the description is more about them getting married and having children and starting a life together and how it evolves. And it's maybe the biggest thing in their relationship, or I don't know, there is very many happenings, because it's about 1,000 pages long book, so there is much. But one in particular stayed in my mind. It was a death in the family. There was one family member that got sick and was very ill for a long time and then died. This man, Konstantin Levin, he didn't know what to do. He didn't know how to talk to the dying person, or what he should have done, or help him or not help him. And of course he thought that there is no use of helping him because he's going to die anyway. And he's very nasty because he's awfully sick. And he didn't want his wife to come along to see the dying person, but she was persistent and came along. And then came the surprise for Konstantin Levin, because when his wife, the very upper class young lady, came to the wretched hole that the dying person lived in, she just rolled her sleeves and got into action. She started to organize things and put things like doctors and priests and everything, and clean linen and those things that women do. And she talked to the dying person like anyone, like all the time, and hold his hand and didn't shy away just because he was dying. And at that point, Konstantin Levin understood that his wife, that he thought was a little bit stupid and just interested in all the vain things, was actually quite strong. And all the things that she fussed about, linen and everything like that, was actually in place. And he saw how this relative get a lot more comfortable and better mood when his wife got in and started to do what she did. And that was well described, that notion that things wasn't like he thought they would be, but that his wife was actually a decent lady and a capable one. But there is, of course, this kind of a critique towards society in many places. This character, this Konstantin Levin, he wants to know his peasants, and he wants to make their lives better, and he wants to work with them and be like one of them, which of course wasn't possible because he wasn't one of them. He was like insanely rich man in today's standards. But he wanted to address equality. He wanted to root out poverty, but he was a sensible man nevertheless. He wanted his children to inherit his funds and not to just give it all away, like in some cases is described. But there is a lot of critique towards the society. And then there is, of course, this matter of adultery and lovers and relationships. And there has been a mixed interpretation, but I read books. I only recommend you the books that I have truly read it through and thought about. And what I did read from this book about these marital affairs and decency was the same thing that Leo Tolstoy lived by, which is very religious approach. So there are duties for women and men that are more bounding and more powerful than a sudden feelings of love. And I read it here very clearly, and I think that you notice it too. But some literature experts have written that Tolstoy was very open-hearted and open-minded because he thought that love affairs of a heart are more important than marriage and sacraments of the church. But I don't believe that for a second. Of course, it's very close to hypocrisy to think that you actually can now, 200 years later, know what the writer thought about when he did write this book. There is no way. I can only imagine what they have thought, and I can read multiple books from the same writer, so I can gather the information from multiple sources, because people's own value system always comes through in one way or another. But I don't think that anybody can say what he thought when he wrote this book. So it's for us to decide and to read what we want to read. But you can read this book without any notion of religion or Christian order. You can read this just as a marvelous description of events. If I had to think about this book and compare it to War and Peace, I prefer War and Peace. These are almost as good, but I think that is better. But if you shy away from the title of War, then I recommend you start with this. This is a remarkable book. This is a very good book. And this is also similar in that kind of way than War and Peace. Like I said, it's 1,000 pages. So take your time, take your cup of tea and read it in a peaceful environment. And take your time. Don't rush through the pages. The longer you read, the longer you can enjoy the fiction, the story that Tolstoy wrote. If you decide to read these books, there are 2 links down below in the description box. One to Bookshop in United States and one to Bookshop in United Kingdom. The Bookshop organization distributes its profit to a small bookshops, which is, I think, a delightful idea. The links are affiliate links, so if you use them, the bookshop gives me a small commission for every book sold, but the price of the book for you is the same whether you use my link or not. But just for the information where you can find these. And I have clicked through these hard-covered copies for the simple reason then the font is usually bigger in hardcover pieces than in paperbacks. And that's much easier to read for us that we need glasses. I hope you have a great day. I see you soon with the next book. Goodbye.